We are live.
All right.
Awesome. We are live. Woohoo! That's exciting. So, welcome to the Alberta Prosperity Project's weekly webinar. For those of you that are just logging in for the very first time, we usually do this on a Wednesday. It happens to be a Monday, but that's because we wanted to get our guest for his full attention, and this was about the only time. You're such a busy guy. But a couple of quick notes before we get into that in introducing our guest. The Alberta Prosperity Project, also known as APP, is a not-for-profit, nonpartisan educational society uniting all Albertans, businesses, and organizations to protect their prosperity, interests, individual freedoms, rights, and self-determination by enabling Alberta to chart a new path forward. The path to prosperity and freedom is through independence within or without Canada. That's the APP stance on that. So what I'd like to do at the beginning, before we even talk about ourselves, we're actually launching a contest. There's a reason why this is going live. We want you guys to ask questions of our guests, as well as we want you guys to share this. So if you're on Facebook and you want to share this, we ask that you share it, and you also put in the hashtag of APP Epstein. So it's APP EPSTEIN. And why would you want to do that? Well, because we're giving away 3 pairs of tickets for the guest of honor here. APP has invited our guest, Alex Epstein, on Friday, October 28th at the Westin Calgary Airport. And I believe those tickets are $50 a piece. And so if you can share that, you get a chance to win tickets for that. And 3 pairs of tickets. And the draw will take place on Thursday, October 20th at 6 p.m. And we're actually doing the deadline for sharing this webinar is noon on Thursday, October 20th. That way we have enough time to compile, because we need that amount of time. It's we're expecting a lot of people logging in, sharing. So for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Kerry Lambert, and the reason I'm involved with the APP is it's a long, drawn-out story, but essentially I was the owner of a place called Outlaws Tap House and Bar in Calgary, and when COVID hit, we were open, we were closed, we had plexiglass on, we did the masking. And there was a point in time when we decided that, no, you know what, there's this masking thing, we just don't understand it. We want to know the science of it. And at that time, patrons could come into the restaurant and not wear masks, but staff had to. And we actually had 3 staff members that needed to wear masks, and they were either not working or relegated into the back. And so we took a stand on that and said, no, show us the science. And it didn't take long for Alberta Health Services to come in and issue us warnings and closure notices. They forced the government on us and even the city of Calgary. And so we basically were shut down. So during that time, I became very close friends with a guy you may have heard of. His name is Chris Scott, and it's the Whistle Stop Cafe in beautiful Muir, Alberta. And we basically decided that we were going to try and advocate for asking why these mandates were in place, why these restrictions were in place. We ended up going out on this, you may have heard of it. There was the bunch of trucks that went out to Ottawa in February. I think it was called the Canadian Convoy, something like that. Not really sure. And after that, we ended up doing a thing called the Chris and Kerry Show, where we do a weekly podcast, and we talk about topics that are very close to people's hearts and Albertans, and especially in this sort of a situation where we'll be talking with our absolutely amazing guest. So at this time, I'd like to introduce him. He is Alex Epstein. He is an author. He's a commentator. He's a philosopher. He advocates for fossil fuels. He's a founder and president of the Center for Industrial Progress in San Diego, I believe. He's the author of The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels, and Fossil Future is the new book, Fossil Future: Why Global Human Flourishing Requires More Oil, Coal, and Natural Gas, Not Less. So APP has invited you, Alex, to speak on Friday, October 28th at the Westin Calgary Airport. And the number one question we've been getting, believe it or not, is who is Alex Epstein and why did they invite you? So let's hear what you got to say.
Well, you'd have to ask them why they invited me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm somebody who thinks about energy in a way that's different from what we're told,
Okay.
but in a way that is very, very hard to argue with, as
Mhm.
evidenced by the last 15 years. I've made these arguments, which I'll talk about, and persuaded a lot of people. And other people have tried to debate me when I can actually get them to debate, which is very hard.
Mhm.
And that usually hasn't gone very well for them. And then the people who try to challenge me in print usually just resort to ad hominems or straw men or this kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think the basic idea is that when we're evaluating what to do about energy, and in particular fossil fuels, we need to carefully weigh both the benefits and the side effects of fossil fuels. And the usual approach is to just look at negative side effects of fossil fuels, and often I would argue wildly exaggerate them, but then ignore the positives. And I think you see in the world today the terrible consequences of that, because we basically have a world that has been engaged in fossil fuel benefit denial for the last 15 years. And so what we've done, and Canada should know this better than anyone, we've artificially restricted our ability to supply fossil fuel to the world. But demand for fossil fuel is still growing. And what that means is rising prices of energy, which means rising prices of everything produced using energy, which means rising prices of everything. So this is a very preventable crisis. Canada could have surely played a much bigger role in empowering the world right now, meeting the post-pandemic increase in demand and providing the world, extra energy when there are issues with Russia. But we have gutted our capability. And I believe, one of the roots of it is this fossil fuel benefit denial. And I think Canada is, one of the top 5 exhibits in the world of this irrational approach.
That's right. Yeah. The one of the comments that I had seen was basically, without fuels, mankind, or if you want to throw it out to what our amazing prime minister happens to say, people kind, without fossil fuels, mankind wouldn't have the standard of living that they currently do.
And that is a big understatement.
Can you imagine, like, what else would we be burning wood? And I'm not even sure what else we would be able to do, because everything is made from fossil fuels. Everything's made from plastic. Everything's made from. You want to make any comments on that? Just.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important to recognize how bad life was pre-fossil fuels for the average person, and how bad life is for the average person around the world who lives in what I call the unempowered world. So these are places that use very little energy. And it's notable that there's nowhere in the world that doesn't use fossil fuels that is prosperous. The closest we have is Iceland. Iceland has very special topography, so they have a lot of hydro and a lot of geothermal that's economic, which usually isn't the case. They have a lot of heat close to the surface, but even they use a ton of oil, and then fossil fuels are involved in making all their stuff. But in general, the world is 80% fossil fueled, and we have to, unless you're just a conspiracy believer, you have to recognize that everyone in the world is using fossil fuels because there's something uniquely cost effective about this source of energy. And no other industry besides the fossil fuel industry can provide energy that's at once affordable, reliable, versatile, meaning it can power every type of machine, fulfill every need for energy, not just electricity, and then scalable, able to provide energy to billions of people in thousands of places. And this is part of the fossil fuel benefit denial, is people think, oh yeah, we don't need fossil fuels, we'll just do it with something else. But if you're not a conspiracy believer, then you have to recognize, well, there might be a reason why everyone is using this, even places like Japan that would rather not import fossil fuels, but they're very special properties. And if you try to get rid of something without a viable replacement in a world that needs far more of it, the world needs far more energy, you're going to cause a disaster. And that's exactly what we're in the process of witnessing.
Yeah. So, and I've got a whole list of questions here, and I know people will probably be asking questions as well. I guess I should actually open up my my question and answers here. And but So you're coming here, and do you have? You're obviously the keynote speakers. Do you have a speech prepared for specific to Alberta? Why would people want to come out and listen to you? Is kind of what what I would
You
like.
mean you mean versus watching me on YouTube?
Yes.
Well, it's not a bad idea to watch me on YouTube. So
Yeah.
I encourage people to do that. And I think there's, being in person is usually, I mean, I think this is something people experience, particularly in Canada, during COVID lockdowns.
Yeah.
Is there something very enjoyable
Yeah.
about being in person, being around other people, connecting that way, versus even the way we're connected now, which is great that we can do that. I couldn't fly up to you right now.
No, that's right. Yeah.
As good as the food is, it wouldn't make sense for me to do that. But yes, I think if people like live events, and then there will be the opportunity for people to ask questions. And I will make some specific remarks about the situation in Alberta and Canada more broadly. I think you guys are unfortunately leaders in a bad way, because they have such a special opportunity with the oil sands. And the oil sands are special in many ways. They're so massive, and they're technologically challenging to access, but that technology is developed amazingly well. I mean, you basically it's kind of like coal. It's just sitting there. But a lot of oil is really hard to find and stuff. You just have this unbelievable deposit sitting there. And really all you need to do is free people to access it, and then crucially free people to transport it across the country and outside the country. And you've basically decided, no, let's not transport it anywhere.
Yeah,
and it's really really an unbelievable act of self-destruction. And it's the world would be so much better, and certainly Canada would be so much better with a very pro fossil fuel attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. The government has policied us to death on certain things, and this is definitely one thing. Like you said, we've got all that oil there, but we can get it, but then what do we do with it? It's got to go somewhere. It's got to get refined. It's got to come back to us. And that infrastructure, they're just not allowing us to do that.
And you've just seen, all these different pipelines and things. It's just because I know a lot of people in industry, and I've interacted with them over the years. And I started visiting Calgary back in 2013, so over 9 years ago now.
Yeah.
And it's just so sad to see these different projects come and go, and just to know how much it would improve life there, how much it would improve life around the world. And I think it particularly shows the weird motives of this movement, because their whole banner is global warming. Canada is one of, if not the coldest countries in the world. And what you have to worry about much more is not having heat in the winter. There's a situation in Europe as well. Like, they're afraid of global warming, but really they're afraid of winter. So it shows that people are not thinking of climate in a realistic and human-centered way. My contention is the obsession with climate is based on the primitive religious belief that it's bad to impact climate, not that our impact is so adverse, because the world is too cold for most people. 1, 2, 3 degrees of warming are not going to make it worse, are not going to make the world terrible, but people just think it's morally wrong. And I think that's why, Canada shows this. Obviously, how is global warming going to be bad for Canada? But you're shutting down the whole country because of it. That shows it's a religion. It's not at all a scientific enterprise.
And the products that are made from oil and gas and basically coal that would fire electrical generators and all that kind of stuff, with that technology, we'd be able to conquer whatever climate change happened to be. If we rose by a couple of degrees or we lowered by a couple of degrees, we'd be able to do something with that.
And we are now. So one of the statistics I've popularized, I mean, I didn't make it up, I just discovered it, but no one was talking about it, is that the rate of climate disaster death has declined 98% over the last century. And I call this phenomenon climate mastery. We can take the enormous natural amount of climate danger and we can overwhelmingly neutralize it, which means if we can do that, then any climate dangers we add, we can also neutralize. And we've been emitting CO2 for 170 years, and life has overall gotten much, much better with 1 degree of warming. And yet people think another half degree or degree is going to be the apocalypse. And again, this is why it's really a religious idea, because there's no science that would say, 1 degree has been amazing with all the energy and with a little warming, but 1.5 degrees, everyone's going to die. This makes no sense, and there's no evidence of it.
Yeah, that's true. So here's a bunch of terms that you've heard before, and I'm going to group them all together, and maybe we can just have a quick discussion on this.
Okay.
So net zero, carbon footprint, carbon neutrality, carbon capture, carbon credits. They all seem to be kind of the same thing, right? And in terms of the big government and corporations, they're trying to basically tell us that whatever they're currently doing right now, they need to basically, kind of make it so that life is much better in the end, I guess. And
I wouldn't say better. I mean, I think it shows. So the commonality there is carbon.
yes,
and the elimination of carbon. And I think particularly the first term, net zero, because
yes,
that means net zero carbon dioxide
yeah,
by 2050. That's the usual meaning of it.
yeah,
What this shows is that the primary moral goal the world has settled on, completely irrationally, in my view,
yeah,
is that we should eliminate our CO2 emissions at all costs. Because
yeah.
notice the world is not saying, hey, let's enrich 8 billion people by 2050, right?
Mhm.
They're not saying that. They're not saying, hey, let's empower 8
Yeah.
billion people so everyone has available energy that they can afford and use. They're saying, above all, no, let's eliminate our CO2 emissions at all costs. And that's what you see, that Canada is being guided by that too. It's not about empowering the Canadian people, enriching them. It's about pursuing this one goal
Yeah.
at the expense of everything else. And really, for the reasons we've discussed, it makes no sense at all to say our number one priority is to get rid of our emissions of this molecule, no matter what adverse effects on human life.
Yeah. Have you heard about the how corporations are going to be doing their carbon credits? And so,
Yes.
company A is, they need 10,000 credits, or they're over 10,000 credits, and then company B will be buying their 10,000 credits. Do you know anything about that, or can you comment on any of that? Yes.
So the basic thing that's going on, I mean, the credits thing can be legitimate
Okay.
with real pollution. So what you can say is, for example, let's just say you vaguely know, like, X amount of sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere is harmful, and then below that, it's okay. Let's say you have a threshold, and it's like legitimate for people to say, okay, like, we would rather keep the level below this. And so we're going to find the major sources. And you can, in sort of, some people will need, or the way it works is, like, some people, it's more crucial for them to be able to emit that, and other people can efficiently not do it. And so that's a legitimate kind of thing. But here, what the goal is you're trying to eliminate CO2 emissions rapidly. And that is not something you can do without mass destruction, because there is no cost-effective way to produce energy at a large scale without a lot of CO2 emissions. And so what's happening then is all of these schemes are just impoverishing us in one way or another, because the threshold at which they would set the carbon credits to be meaningful from their perspective is impoverishing from our perspective. The other thing is there's a huge amount of fraud that goes on. The key thing to recognize with CO2 emissions is there is no scalable way of reducing CO2 emissions without causing human suffering. So you could, for example, you could say, I'm going to plant some trees and that'll offset my footprint.
Yeah.
But you cannot plant enough trees in the world to offset most people's footprint. So what happens is some people just hoard the carbon offsets, and it's usually the wealthier people. So they just virtue signal by saying, oh, I bought up the first offsets at this price, and then other people can't do it. And look, why don't you all act like me? Well, the point is we can't all act like you.
Wow. What about you're talking about the rich buying credits or anything like that. Could you apply that same philosophy to individuals? Like, I'm kind of curious as whether or not this could end up spilling over into sort of a social credit system kind of thing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
This is the dream. So in general, it's important to understand, why do so many power hungry people love this issue?
Yeah.
And the reason is because it gives them universal control over human beings, because everyone emits CO2.
That's right.
So we don't have time to go into COVID and where I agree with you guys and where I might disagree. But I would say that part of the appeal to people I'd say the badly motivated people of a virus was the idea that everyone could possibly carry it. And so then we have the right to control everyone. And my basic belief is you should have innocent until proven guilty. So if somebody actually provably has a virus, you can tell them to quarantine, but you cannot tell everyone to quarantine indefinitely because they might have a virus. But that functions as universal control. And with CO2, it's, everyone is emitting it. So the power lusters want control over that. And you see clips come out of people saying, yeah, we'll calculate this. And for example, I make a lot of flights on Google, and now they calculate the amount of CO2 emissions, right, per flight. And they're like, you're over the average, you're under the average. And it's just obvious that this is going to be followed by more people, that companies will be complicit. And at some point, you'll go if this doesn't stop, and we should stop it, you go to a restaurant and they'll say, no, this meat, you're above your carbon budget for the month. But they're really going to say that, to your the fertilizer factories and the farms, and that's what's really going to harm us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I was just going to make the comment that our prime minister has taken like 20 flights in the last month, and I haven't even been on a plane in the last, a jet plane. I've been on.
But it makes sense because he won't admit this, but his rationale is, if I fly enough to oppose fossil fuels, I'll prevent far more people from flying than I have flown. And if you extend that, it really means these people prevent more emissions than they cause, which really means they just kill a lot of people and ruin their lives. That's what it means to stop people from emitting.
Yeah, that's true too. I know there were a couple of questions that were sent in here. I'm not sure whether or not I can even answer some of these things. I don't see the Facebook feed, so I'll have to see if behind the scenes can probably at least maybe send me a chat of maybe some of the questions that have been asked. Let's just see if I've got something here. No, not really. So more about climate change and how in your book, Fossil Future, do you want to mention anything about we were briefly just talked on the delicate nature of how people are basically thought of as we're the ones that are causing global destruction because we're heating stuff up. We're almost making it as though we're in charge of the climate. Right. And then it's not the world is we just happen to be things that are living on the planet. Right.
Well, in terms of, I think there's a broader view, which I talk about in chapter 3 of Fossil Future, of humans, which I call the parasite polluter view. Yeah. So this is the idea that our essential nature is we take stuff from Earth and then we screw stuff up on Earth. And you can see this underlying the many false apocalypse predictions of the last 50 years, because it is, we're going to run out of resources. We're going to over pollute the world. We're going to have catastrophic global cooling. We're going to have catastrophic global warming. It's all based on this idea of we are these parasite polluters. And that's part of why all these people who are always wrong, they still get elevated, because people still have this false view of us and that our impact is inherently bad. Yeah. And my basic point is, no, our impact is generally very good. The Earth is a deficient and dangerous place. Our impact generally makes it a better place, particularly a better place.
That's right.
For us. Yeah. And it really shows a bias that you assume that our climate impact would be catastrophic. First of all, why are you even assuming it's net negative? Like, there's a lot of positives to more warming. There's certainly a lot of positives of greening. And then if you factor in all the energy we get with the warming, it's obviously overall a great deal to have a world where you have energy and machines doing all this work for us, and it's a little warmer, versus a world that's impoverished like it's been for a couple 100,000 years of our species history. Like, it's so obviously better, and yet again, people are fossil fuel benefit denying.
That's right. So we do have a couple of questions. One was, can we repeat how to share the post and what the hashtag is again? So I believe probably under a banner here, it would be, the hashtag is APP Epstein, and that is APPEPSTEIN, and you can share it on Facebook. You can also share it on any other social media. I think we're on Rumble, we're on YouTube, we're on Twitter, so you can share it there too. And that's why we're basically making the contest until noon on Thursday, and then we'll compile it, and then we'll make the draw at 6 o'clock on Thursday. and we're giving away the 3 pairs of tickets. Here's a question.
Where do they buy tickets if they want to get tickets?
That's a very good question. They can actually go to Alberta Prosperity Project events.com. That's a good one. Or they could actually just go to albertaprosperityproject.com, and then I believe you have to look under events. But the Alberta Prosperity events.com definitely gets you to what's going on here. I believe they even made you a slash there. I think it's Alberta Prosperity Epstein is
Okay, well, I guess Alberta Prosperity Events. I mean, I hope, it's been a while since I've spoken in Calgary. I've spoken many times, but it's been a few years. So I think I haven't been there since post lockdown. So it's going to be fun to see people, including hopefully some familiar.
And that's the thing that I say that about any APP event or any sort of rallies stuff that we go to, is they're always shown on video. Right, you get the hour of whatever it is, and then that's it. But it's the before and after where you can mix and mingle. You can actually talk with other people about topics like this, and I think that is not promoted enough. That it's great to see it online, but it's even better to be there, right? Just looking a few more of these. Don asks, is oil and gas actually a fossil fuel, or is it continuously created? That's a good question.
I don't have a definitive view on this. I've been getting this a lot lately, so I'm going to research it more. I think a lot of it is at least biological in origin, just seems consistent with, we have all these geologists who are studying the history, and they're really good at finding fields based on that. But I don't have what I focus on is, even if it's continuously created in some form, we have natural hydrocarbons on other planets and this kind of thing. If that is true, great, but we still have plenty of this stuff.
Yes.
Even if it's all biological.
Yeah.
And so we need to be free to use this, and then be free to develop alternatives, including nuclear in the long term. That's my focus.
Yeah. So Graham asks, do you think the leaders of the anti-fossil fuel movement actually believe what they preach, or is it just a money-making scam, big Ponzi scam?
I never think anything is just a money-making scam. Yeah. I think that there are, my view, I talk about this in chapter 3 of the book, is that a lot of the leaders have a deep hostility toward human life that's really manifested in this idea that our impact is bad. The whole idea of green means minimal impact. Yeah. And I think it's a really anti-human idea to say that a good Earth is one that we impact the least. Why is that? I mean, that just shows you really have a hostility toward just our species. I call this human racism, because you think everything the human race does is bad, and the rest of nature is great. So I think that's a totally wrong view. But I do think people have this view, and I think in the case of climate, again, that's why there's such an obsession with our climate impact being evil, even though it's not that big a deal. And the energy that comes with it is amazingly beneficial. It's because people see it in this, it's like it's going against their religion. But whenever you have what I call, whenever you have a popular moral movement, which this is, I think it's ultimately immoral, but it's in the category of morality. Yeah. What happens is there are all kinds of people who want power and who want money dishonestly, who will jump in because they see, hey, everyone is going in this direction. How can I get in on the racket? And that definitely happens as well, but I think it's secondary. Yeah. And of course, the big question that people often ask is, so where, all the governments are trying to go towards battery and electricity and all that kind of stuff. And how do they make batteries, and how do they make electricity? And we still need coal. You can't make steel by burning by just electricity. I believe you actually have to smelt it. It's got to be ridiculously hot in order to make steel. And you just can't do that through electricity, through wind turbines and all that. And how do you even make wind turbines? You still need that. So there's that argument that we still need oil and coal and natural gas anyways. Yeah, although I think that's conceding a bit too much to the viability of these alternatives. So there's an issue of what you want. I mean, ultimately, you want something superior to fossil fuels. I mean, you want the best energy possible. And so what would be exciting is if we had alternatives that were more cost effective, at least on a smaller scale.
Okay.
And then you'd be excited about them. But if you're talking about solar and wind and batteries, you would recognize, oh, these require a ton of materials, challenges. How are you going to do this? But they're not even performing very well, even on a tiny scale. They need to be subsidized and mandated and given all sorts of preferences. They just provide electricity because they're unreliable. They depend on fossil fuels or the equivalent of fossil fuels. So I just don't grant that these are anywhere near like promising. They're not even successful supplements right now. And to talk about replacing fossil fuels, you always have to remember the world needs far more energy. So what we want to be having is energy additions of fossil fuels and other things. The idea of getting rid of fossil fuels, if you really value energy, should be viewed as crazy unless you have some magical alternative that clearly doesn't exist right now.
Yeah. You know, I like the idea of electric cars in certain processes. I like the idea of possibly doing electric trucks for moving equipment. Now here in Canada, Air Canada has hopped on and bought a bunch of electric planes that again have a very limited amount.
They're flying a lot of passengers in those
planes? Well, I don't even think they're built yet, but I mean they ended up going through the purchase. And again, it would be a limiting. You might only be able to fly, say, 250 miles, which really doesn't. Yeah, I guess it does.
That's very charitable.
I know.
Depending on how many people. I mean, there's a solar plane that cost, I think, $100 million and flew one person before it was grounded.
Yeah, that's right too. So there are challenges for sure, right? And I think, I really do think that.
I mean, challenges. It's just these are fake. So the thing is, we're talking about getting rid of the energy that works in a world that needs far more, based on like these currently crackpot ideas, like electric planes. It makes. I mean, there's batteries are so heavy in terms of storing energy. So it's one thing to say I'm in favor of freedom and I encourage alternatives, and certainly like passenger EVs have some advantages, and that's great. They should be free to compete. But the idea of forcing us to not use fossil fuels and then forcing these totally unproven and currently in many ways inferior alternatives, that is not a legitimate idea. So don't equate like experimenting with something with forcing it on us. And that often gets equated, and they act like they're enthusiastic, whereas really they're just coercing us. Yeah,
that's true too. Well, you know what? It's 8 o'clock here. It's 7 o'clock for you, and I know we definitely value your time. So I'm just going to do the quick little wrap up here that you're coming to Calgary and speaking at the Westin Calgary Airport on Friday, October 28th. Tickets are $50 right now, and they can buy the tickets up until the 24th at midnight, I believe. So basically a few days before. I've lost my page here. There we go. And you can also purchase the tickets at albertaprosperityevents.com. And I know there's a couple of little posters up on the Alberta Prosperity website, and it says there's a mix and mingle with beef and beer. So I hope you like Alberta beef, and I hope you like beer.
I like the beef part of it. I like other drinks more than beer.
I'm pretty sure there'll be more than that too. So, and then Alex is speaking at 7 o'clock, and then there's a question and answer at 8. And so we're excited about having you here. And I don't know if you want to make any closing remarks.
It'd be fun to see a lot of people there, and I would just say, if you can't make it for some reason, still highly recommend checking out the book Fossil Future. It's big. It's got all the arguments you need. And then the best free resource I have is called energytalkingpoints.com. And I think Canadians who are for energy will find it very, very useful, because we have talking points with references on any issue you can imagine.
And what's your social media stuff? Where do you?
My main one is on Twitter. I'm at Alex Epstein. I'm also on Instagram at Alex Epstein Energy. Those are the two ones, but Twitter is kind of where I go the most. Okay,
perfect. Good. And so one more just plug for our contest is please share this and share it on whatever social media with the hashtag APP Epstein. That's APPEPSTEIN. And that way we can track what's going on. And on behalf of APP, I'd really like to say thank you so much for taking the time and being able to promote this, and definitely looking forward to sharing some beef with you on Friday.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you very much. Okay, cheers. All right. Bye-bye.